go ahead and get started so that we have plenty of time for conversation today. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Carly Woods, and I'm from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, current chair of NCA's Committee for International Discussion and Debate. I wanted to briefly recognize the other members of the CIDD, Anne-Marie Todd, Wayne Kramer, and Ted Shekels. And I should say there's lots of supporters in the room of the CIDD generally. And so we're very grateful for your support. I have a couple of comments before we get started with our debate today. Because as, of course, we turn our attention to the history of the discipline at this year's NCA convention, we also must turn our attention to the history of international debate exchanges, and there's a really fruitful and productive and interesting history there. When Robert Hall and Jack Rhodes reviewed 50 years of international debate exchange history in 1977, they declared that, quote, "The international debate program has been variously interpreted as worthless and invaluable, damaging to forensics and the salvation of forensics, representative and unrepresentative of both American and foreign debaters, and disappointing and immensely rewarding." So we have a storied history there. I've also, in my research, found some happier comments about the history of international debate. Many of you know that the International Debate Program formally stretches back to the 1920s. In 1923, Bates College President Clifton Gray wrote to U.S. President Calvin Coolidge to inform him about an upcoming debate between Bates and Oxford. Coolidge's response made clear that not only was he aware that such events were taking place, but also that they held incredible potential to foster goodwill and international relations. This is a quote from Coolidge. "I think that international debating bouts bringing together the representatives of both sides of the Atlantic constitute one of the surest modes of promoting amity and true understanding between the English-speaking peoples." So Silent Cal was not so silent about the value of international debate. Thank you. Though much has changed in the intervening 90 years, these debates still matter. And today we want to acknowledge our international connections, especially our relationships with the English-Speaking Union and the Japan Debate Association. I do want to add one more historical tidbit. In 1928, for the first time, the National Student Federation selected 3 women to represent the UK in a debate tour of the US. 86 years ago, Leonora Lockhart, Nancy Samuel, and Marjorie Sharp made quite a splash. Their tour stops were covered by the national and local newspapers. People showed up in droves to watch their debates on coeducation. They were treated like celebrities wherever they went. They were called Britain's brainy beauties in the press. And they went on to be accomplished scholars, politicians, and writers, respectively. In fact, some of you might recognize the name Marjorie Sharp for her most famous work, The Rescuers, which has inspired 2 Disney films. So, no pressure. Now, I mentioned this because based on my research, this may have been the last time that an all-woman British team was selected to participate in the tour. Can anybody challenge me on that claim? Okay, good. Then I'm going to claim it is, until this year. So we're hoping that after today's debate, you'll be willing to share some of your insight about international debates, past, present, and future. I will also call your attention to a panel featuring Brian Lane, Steve Yano, Wayne Kramer, Jamie McCown, and Katz Kurosawa, called International Normal Social Excessive Academic Debates, Historical Exchanges Within and Without NCA. That's going to take place tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in the Chicago Hilton, Willowford B on the 3rd floor. So now, for those of you who don't know, this is the 26th stop, right? On an 8-week tour for our representatives of the English-Speaking Union, Kate Brooks and Alice Coombs-Huntley. They've been coast to coast. They've debated a number of exciting topics. Kate Brooks is a postgraduate student reading for the DPhil in International Relations at the University of Oxford. She's also head of competitive debating at the Oxford Union. Alice Coombs-Huntley recently graduated from the University of Bristol with a first-class degree in English literature. She's been involved with the ESU since she was a teenager, first as a member of the England World's team, and now as a member of the English team committee. Kate and Alice, I've asked them to share just a little bit about their experience before we get started. Some brief comments from our visitors. Would you like to?
Yes, okay, yes. So I suppose that now would be a good point to actually do thank yous rather than when we're doing the debate. So I think Alice and I both want to say a huge thank you firstly for NCA for allowing us to do this tour, which has been, I think, by far and away the best experience that Alice and I have had so far.
Yeah, it's the best thing I've ever done. Like, just is. Better than my degree, better than anything personally that's happened to me. And I'm incredibly sad that it's going to end at the end of this debate. It's just been amazing. Thank you.
So hopefully we live up to a little bit to our predecessors in 1928 and hopefully have gained some of the more positive adjectives that you were reading out earlier rather than a few negative ones. If we are the negative ones, please don't tell us till we've left. That would be great. Also, I'd like to thank you for all of our hosts, many of you who are here, for putting up with us and treating us so nicely when we were in all of your different states. Probably particularly to Wayne Kramer, who's had the dubious honour of effectively hosting us twice, having had to also look after us here when we got in at 7 a.m. from a very early morning flight. And also thank you to all of the CIDD committee who organised all of this, and particularly to Carly, who I know was in charge this year. So the CID committee clearly do lots of things. A lot of it is invisible to us. So a lot of the work I'm sure we don't know about, but thank you to all of the CID committee for everything that you do. And thank you to all of you for taking time out of your busy conference to come and listen to this final debate. And our last stop of the tour. Do you want to say more?
No, because I'll start to cry.
Well, so we don't get too sentimental, Kate and Alice will be defending a motion in a short showcase debate today. This House regrets the rise of the Tea Party. They'll be debating against two formidable opponents who are both veterans of debate tours themselves. Steve Yano is the Director of Debate at St. John's University. He has a Ph.D. in Communication from the University of Pittsburgh, an M.A. in Speech Communication from Syracuse University, and a B.A. in History from Texas A&M. He researches the pedagogy of debate and argumentation and the rhetoric of the beat generation and blogs at what will soon be sophist.nyc.
Sophist.nyc.
Okay. And also hosts a weekly podcast on international debating, In the Bin, available at inthebin.podbean.com. All right. Kaori Miyawaki has just this week earned her doctorate in communication from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She also earned an MA in communication from University of Northern Iowa and a BA in intercultural communication from Tokyo. She toured the U.S. as a Japanese exchange debater in 2006 and is currently revising her dissertation on the rhetorical construction of citizenship in the Japanese-American internment. Each debater will offer roughly a 5-minute constructive. Each team will offer roughly a 3-minute rebuttal. Points of information are permitted during the constructives, and then we'll open it up to audience Q&A.
Okay, thanks very much everyone. We're here today on the last of our tour to regret the rise of the Tea Party. Now, being British, I actually can't remember another time that I've regretted a Tea Party. But this one is particularly terrible, and we definitely regret it. What I can remember is the night of Obama's election, because I stayed up all night in Britain and watched President Barack Obama being elected. And the world was watching America at this moment, because we thought, for the first time in many years, America had the possibility of living up to its promise as a country, that it was a country of equality, justice, and liberty for all. And that didn't just mean something to Americans, it meant something to us as well. Unfortunately, what became rapidly apparent in the months after Obama's election was that promise was not going to be fulfilled. And actually the backlash of the most privileged in American society, the white, the wealthy, the Christian, and often the male, that they were not willing to allow anyone else a possibility of the privileges that they had so long monopolized. And that any possibility that Obama might have had to redistribute wealth or to allow for greater social justice in America was going to be crushed by those people who were the most privileged and were not willing to share any of America's benefits. Now we think that that this is in itself inherently regrettable. We think that the fact that a group that was already so powerful and so numerous emerged whose primary goal was to prevent people other than themselves from accessing the social and economic benefits of their country is something that is inherently to be regretted. Let's be clear about this. Let's not have any nonsense about what the Tea Party is. The Tea Party aren't just fiscal conservatives, because they differentiate between government spending. They think that Social Security and Medicare, the benefits which they get, which they believe themselves to be legitimately entitled to, are fine. So as long as government money is spent on the white and the wealthy, that's okay by them. Who do they want to cut off, though? They want to cut off single mothers, people who aren't white, people who can't get jobs, people who are underprivileged. They say that those people are lesser deserving, they are lesser Americans, and not deserving of government money. We think that's inherently regrettable. And also, don't be fooled by any claims that the opposition might have to tell you that all things that come out of democracy are inherently good. That's obviously not true. Voters sometimes make bad choices. Often grassroots organisations campaign for things which are inherently bad. Simply because these are people expressing their views doesn't mean that that's an inherent good. We have to be able to say that sometimes things happen in democracy which are bad. Yeah.
So, in your vision of democracy, people can't share their ideas freely. What is their alternative going to be if they really believe these things?
People shouldn't believe these things. It's nasty. If you are part of a democracy, that involves having democratic values, such as equality, liberty, being able to have fellow citizens that you care about. The Tea Party are anti-democratic, as shown by the fact that they have been at the forefront of restrictive voter ID laws that have come in the past few years. They specifically want not only to deprive these groups of government money, but to actively disenfranchise them and to only enfranchise themselves. This is inherently anti-democratic. I'm not going to take any of that nonsense. This also has had enormous consequences, because this isn't just about a group that is nasty and we should inherently regret. This has had actual practical consequences. I mean, there's probably no need to mention the government shutdown, but maybe, and I'm probably not alone here, I think that the government of the largest economy in the world probably shouldn't shut down. Maybe that would be a better way to run a country. Possibly. But more than that, because the Tea Party is obviously dying now, but it has left a pernicious legacy. It has left a legacy where America is more polarised than at any point in living memory. It has left a legacy where the Republican Party has been forced to absorb the Tea Party and tack further right than anyone could have imagined a decade or 2 decades ago. And the Tea Party has been instrumental in this. This isn't just something that's happening in the Republican Party or happening in America. The Tea Party has been at the forefront of leading this change of ideas. Because that's how discourse works. It's by persuading people. And discourse is self-perpetuating and cyclical. And the fact that you have people in positions of power espousing these views changed the discourse of America and made it more right-wing and more polarised than it would otherwise be. Fundamentally, America, you're out of time, is a much worse place for the rise of the Tea Party. It is the worst part of America. It is a nasty and horrible party who we should inherently regret. And the consequences have been that America is a much worse place for anyone who's not rich and anyone who's not white. That is regrettable.
Well, it gives me great pleasure as somebody from New York City, along with somebody from Japan, to explain why the Tea Party is an essential part of America from 2 people who couldn't be more American. I have a lot to tell you today about why we shouldn't regret the Tea Party. It does have to do with the functioning of democracy, not necessarily that everything comes out of democracy is good. I agree with that. But it also is fun to come back after years of not debating against somebody who's been on a whirlwind debate tour. 2 people have been on a whirlwind debate tour, debating probably every 6 hours or so against myself, who I have a lot of trouble just sort of articulating in my class what I want them to do assignment, without a lot of training. So here we go. We're going to try to get into this. I have a lot to say about the normal functioning of democracy and why we should allow for polarization, why polarization might be an indicator that democracy is really healthy and good as a response to them. But first, I'd like to tell you a really important story that might make you cry. It's about the most important American to ever live, and in fact, the first American. And it's not Ted Cruz, and it's not Rand Paul, it's not even Thomas Jefferson. It is Diogenes. Diogenes was the best American to ever live. Why? Because Diogenes embraced what American democracy is about: trolling. Trolling is what America has always been about. The Declaration of Independence was that century's 4chan. The Tea Party, the actual Boston Tea Party that she regrets, was actually some kind of a, who knows who did this thing, it was actually some kind of practice in order to get people stirred up. Diogenes was an instigator who confronted mainstream opinion with horrible, regrettable actions and horrible, regrettable statements to get people to think. We believe, on this side of the House, that lazy adherence is a bigger threat to democracy than any policy against a social welfare state could be. That any policy denying welfare mothers their rights could be. Because it's that thought of why we do what's right is most important to keeping a healthy democracy. And that's why we support Diogenes, the first American, on this side of the House. Now, what is lazy, sleepy adherence, lazy adherence? What is that? It's the idea that we would not support any country where people just lazily do what's right because everybody thinks that that's the right thing to do. We prefer people going to the polls and voting for things because they are not right now, because they are very upset and because they want to go and do what they think is right. We support that kind of an environment much better because we think long term that leads to the survivability of a state that over time would be more inclusive and better. Things like immediate harms to people are very important and very considered, but there hasn't been really any hardcore policy to reduce these kind of things. I mean, shutting the government down is terrible, but it might be just an act to get these people what they want. I'll go ahead and take you.
Okay, so only 10% of reported Tea Party members ever watch any news source other than Fox News. Are you seriously telling me that they are the most critically engaged people in America?
No, but they need to. I mean, I agree with you. They need to be the most critically engaged people in America. What's the alternative when people like this, who believe that they're right and believe that their beliefs are right and coming to you from somewhere that's not the news, what do they become if they don't have an opt-in into the political system? I'll tell you exactly who they become. They become Timothy McVeigh. That is the harm that we don't want on this side of the House. People who feel there's no place for them in the system turn to terroristic acts, hostility, and the use of weapons to get what they want. They become this kind of person. If we give them the Tea Party in to say, look, the system will talk to us, the system does believe in what, there is a way we can convince people of what we want, then they won't turn to this kind of violence. I'd rather have them parading around as open carry people than plotting in their mother's basement for how they're going to kill the evil federal officers. I'd rather have that. No, thank you. Now, let's talk a little bit about what the Tea Party is and what it's meant to be. They provide a pretty good definition of who the Tea Party is. It's a bunch of these people who really feel that they've been disenfranchised, they hate Obama, this kind of thing. But who are the people they're putting into power? People who are not a serious threat. People like Ted Cruz, people like Rand Paul, who, if you look at what they're really about themselves. They see this as a payday for themselves, ladies and gentlemen. They don't actually want to go in and change the government in this radically horrible way. Their argument is sort of like Taylor Swift should be regretted because she's going to ruin music theory, ladies and gentlemen. There's still going to be good composition. There's still going to be good music. We might regret her. We might regret Rand Paul because we don't like him. But that kind of thing is essential to make sure that people are engaging in democracy the right way. I'll take you again.
So, given that most of the Tea Parties are over 65, is your argument really that if we don't allow them to express their view in this way, we're going to get granny terrorism?
Yeah, I think that's what I said. I mean, I don't know their age or who they are, but I don't know if that's the best way to assume that we would know them kind of well. It's kind of this lazy adherence idea is that, look, we know who these people are. We have them clocked. We know exactly who they are. We know where they live. It's all fine. These are horrible people. Their ideas don't matter. This kind of thing is bad for democracy. Very bad for democracy. Here's what the Tea Party's given us and why they're not inherently regrettable or any other kind of regrettable they could be. They've given the left a lightning rod. And they've given liberal people a reason to say, look, go out and vote. Go out and participate. Go out and do these kind of things and advocate for these positions that, reasonable people, in my view, should support things like social welfare systems. It seems ridiculous that this would be a good idea to cut this thing. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm out of time. But anyway, we have a lot more to tell you. I'm sorry I have to end now, but vote the Diogenes. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gents, I'm going to chat to you all about communication, because I think you might be interested in it, and have a chat about what chats should be like, and when sometimes a conversation isn't a conversation if the other side doesn't listen, or as we learn in policy, if the other side spreads because then you can't understand them anyway. But now, firstly, 4 bits of rebuttal. This idea of lazy adherence to ideals, that probably is a problem, but it's not as though the Tea Party came about and then everyone in America was like, let's read some philosophy. What does Marx say? What does Hegel say? What should our principles and ideals be? Because that's not the way Fox works, really. It's not the way CNN works, either. It's not the way that the majority of your countrymen and countrywomen unfortunately think. It's not true that there have been debates about ideals. There's just been one side going, you are the devil, you are the devil, women shouldn't have rights. And then some people being like, huzzah! And then everyone else being like, no, that's dreadful. But there's been no debate, there's been no discussion. And they say, we've heard, otherwise they need to be terrorists. No! Untrue! Categorically, it wasn't there was a crisis point in 2009 and bombs had started getting off and the Koch brothers were like, oh, this is interrupting business. We better fund the terrorists in a better way. It's simply untrue, but also we're not banning them, right? We're not saying ban them, allow the terrorism to happen. We're saying it's regrettable. In the same way that terrorism would have been regrettable, but I do think it is a terrorist act to shut down your government and not allow your country to function. Then we hear that politicians just care about themselves. It's true of Tea Party politicians. That's a problem because they're lying to lots of working class Americans who do think the country will be better because they have bought into the rhetoric of evil and the Democrat Party being synonymous. That is a problem. Wherever these politicians caring about themselves only is a problem when they do want to help Wall Street and don't want to help anyone else. No, thank you. Lastly, the idea it's a lightning rod for the left. That's simply not true if many voters on the left of the spectrum can't vote because of voter ID laws, and you can't engage a debate with people who won't debate you. Okay, so on to democracy. You know, I'm sure you've all heard the kind of novice debater being like, democracy is about everyone having a say, and that is nice. And that is true, that does seem nice. But what democracy is actually about practically is about collaborating everyone's views and reaching some kind of meaningful and workable compromise, yes.
I think this is exactly what democracy is about. Why is it regrettable that people who have strange views, who kept quiet for so long, are now speaking out? Why is that bad?
Okay, thank you, because they don't want to compromise. I'm going to come on to this later. So it's about working out solutions. So most Americans believe that there should be some kind of education system. It's how we work out how education policy works. Most Americans don't want the poor to die in a street because they can't get health care. It's just about how they reach health care. I mean, the Tea Party probably do want that. But most... right? So the thing is, the Tea Party don't want any kind of discussion or any kind of debate. And there are 3 ways that they just hijack any kind of political conversation. Firstly, they make politics a zero-sum game. They immediately assume that any win for the Democrats, any motion that's been mandated by the Democrats, any bill that's been backed by Democrats, if that passes, that is automatically a loss for the Republican Party. That means you can't have party cooperation on any bill. They can't co-opt any good idea, which obviously you have to do as you learn new situations, and you should adapt from your opposition. They give you a good idea, you should use it, if it still falls in line with some of your principles. Secondly, they sour every political conversation. They have hyperbolic rhetoric that's extreme in the utmost. You're branded anti-American if you don't want tiny government and rights only for old men. You're branded a devil if you think Obama has any good policy. They also turn on their own. So internal discussion within the Republican Party becomes worse because of the Tea Party. Look at the vitriol that was poured on Chris Christie because he hugged Obama and said some of the policies are okay. That's ridiculous. That's not any kind of discussion even within your own party. Look at the fact that in Republican primaries for the last presidential election, every candidate had to come out and say they wanted a total ban on abortion because the Tea Party were pushing that agenda, despite the fact that most Republicans thinking abortion's probably fine, at least in some circumstances. Lastly, they refuse to compromise. Engagement is seen as weakness. Discussion is seen as failure. Absolute adherence to extremes, bizarre phrases like freedom, but only freedom, again, for white men, and bizarre conceptions of how politics, well, basically shouldn't work, means that government can't achieve everything. Because if you want to be represented, and you want to be represented, and you want to be represented, the representatives representing you have to work together. That doesn't happen if one party or even one senator refuses to allow any discussion. Government shutdown has to be regrettable. People with awful views have to be regrettable. And communication and debate being stopped because of these lunatic individuals with terrible views has to be regrettable. Please propose. Oppose. Oppose.
Propose.
Oppose us.
I've like lost the logic.
So, thank you for coming, and I'd like to emphasize that we don't really discuss about people, but the system or organization of the Tea Party. So, well, some individual in Tea Party might be bad, like this, well, they hate women or they hate all gay people. That might happen, but it's about individuals, not about a Tea Party. And we are arguing that a Tea Party is actually a healthy form of democracy. We have some oppositions and we have various arguments in the society, and that's actually good. We can create like social changes through persuasion, through making arguments. So Tea Party is one way to create arguments in a democratic society. And I also want to argue against the first point, like the laziness. And so we would argue that the Tea Party actually make more political engagement. Well, let's say, well, not all U.S. citizens are eager to involved in politics. Like, well, some people are just eating potato chips on their couch, and whatever. I don't know. I don't really care about politics. That can happen. But the Tea Party made them get involved. So, like, people who are indifferent for politics might get interested by watching Tea Party on media, or the Tea Party has some political form, or like that they have like big presence in media that can make people think about their political views. So it doesn't really mean that, well, voters gonna be persuaded by the Tea Party or not, but they gonna have an opportunity to think about politics or think about their community, think about the United States as a citizen, as a voter. So that's create a more political engagement. That's we think the healthy form of democracy, and that's the America should be. I'm from Japan, but I believe it. And so I will, and they also said that Tea Party people are kind of hating women's rights, gay people, and they don't really collaborate. But I would like to say we need to distinguish individual versus the Tea Party. As long as I know, no Tea Party officially argue that they discriminate against women, they discriminate against gay people. They rather argue that they're gonna respect, they want to protect the Constitution. So they are trying their best to create a better society, maybe to be inclusive. I don't know, but their argument is about individual members in the Tea Party. But we are talking about the Tea Party as an organization, as a system. And yeah. When the Tea Party candidate for senator in Indiana said that when a woman gets raped and gets pregnant, that is God's will, how is that not against the rights of women in America?
It can be, well, I hate that argument for information. I don't support that argument, but I respect that argument as part of like a democracy, or as a one argument that's possible to make in a society or in a democratic society. And remember that we all have a right to vote. We only have one vote. That means if we don't like arguments by the member of a Tea Party, we can say no. And that's how democracy works. So that, as I said, that political engagement is one great benefit of having Tea Party in the United States. People are gonna start think about who to vote or what kind of opinion I should make. So the Tea Party make us clarify our political stance or arguments. So that's good for democracy. And yeah, and and I wanna also clarify that Republicans and Tea Party is not always equal. Well, we know that some Republican members are a member of Tea Party, but it doesn't always equal. And Tea Party, and Tea Party does they have their own opinion, and they say the Tea Party doesn't collaborate or doesn't really hear other voices, but it's not. Well, they can. Well, first they can, and second, even though they don't really willing to listen, we can counter. We can create our own arguments, and we can have. Well, we can create another organization to counter to the Tea Party, and that's also a way to promote democracy. Thank you.
Okay, in my very quick summary, I'm going to chat about what it means to regret something, and then also about democracy generally, because, you know, America, democracy, woo. So what does it mean to regret something? The opposition have said that we shouldn't regret this, because if the alternative would have been worse, the alternative that they propose is only one alternative, that of geriatric terrorism. And I don't think I'm alone in thinking this is probably quite implausible. Moreover, even if the Tea Party, under any other name, had then gone on to commit terrorism, we would also regret that. What we're actually envisioning in our world is, when we're saying we regret the Tea Party, is that there was another alternative, and that was that America's white and privileged people just sucked it up when Obama got elected, and dealt with the fact that they weren't the only people in America who had rights, and they weren't the only ones who deserved money and power. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about. What we said on our side, however, was we had two things that we're regretting. We're saying that the Tea Party is inherently regrettable. We've had no response to that in the opposition, and indeed in most of their arguments, they've implicitly conceded by being like, well, they are pretty nasty. We also said that it has consequences for America in terms of making things worse. And we'll talk to you about their responses to that in terms of impact upon democracy. So we have this claim that all views further democracy. That's obviously not true, right? If certain people's views are explicitly anti-democratic, that doesn't further democracy. If people's views are that other people should be shut out, other people should be given less rights, that is anti-democratic. That doesn't further democracy. They then said, well, these people should be allowed to express their views. They weren't listened to before. What? Right? These people were already the most politically active in America. These people were often predominantly existing Republican members. Moreover, they were white, they were privileged, they were wealthy. They were the ones that America was listening to begin with. Like, if you want to tell me the Koch brothers weren't listened to prior to the Tea Party, that's obviously nonsense. They then said, well, no, alternative views and extreme views prove that democracy is working. So your government literally shut down. That is literal proof of democracy not working, right? Physically not working. Moreover, like, the very fact of democracy is that you have to compromise. That is what democracy working goes to, right? So even if you have extreme views, you have to meet somewhere in the middle, because that's democracy, but having most people's views the most represented. The Tea Party have explicitly said no compromise is possible with the Democrats. They then said, well, at least it's got more people involved. Obviously not true. No response to Alice's point about the fact that actually they've been explicitly shutting out people that they don't want to vote by restrictive voter ID laws. Moreover, I don't know about you, but when I see the Tea Party on TV, my response isn't like, American politics, great, I want to get involved in that. Moreover, when you have Michelle Bachmann going on TV saying, I'm a good woman who obeys my husband, this is not incentivising the kind of people who you want to into politics, such as women, right? This is explicitly telling women their place is in the home and not in politics. Again, actively shutting out views. Fundamentally, the priority of the Tea Party is to keep other people out of democracy and have a democracy of whites and wealthy only. That is not the democracy that America should be. Very proud to propose.
Well, thank you guys for your attention. I know all of my female friends, when Michelle Bachmann speaks, they listen to exactly what she says and do exactly what she does. I'm a little concerned about that now, after hearing that last speech. Ladies and gentlemen, the only thing you need to consider today is what we've agreed upon, and that is wealthy white people are losing their privilege and they're upset about it. What happens when people are threatened their privilege and their position in society? Oftentimes they turn to violence. Whether they're 65 or 25, it's a problem. And their lampooning of it just shows exactly the kind of problem that we have in American democracy. their rhetoric is extremely similar to the Tea Party rhetoric that they decry. They say, these people are terrible, exclude them from the system. They don't need to be a part of it. Kick them out. They don't need the benefits of democratic voices. That's the kind of democracy I don't want to live in. That's the democracy of lazy adherence, that we're good because we're good, and they're bad because they're bad. And that is American democracy now. I don't want that. I want polarized, nasty American democracy where I do turn on the TV and I see somebody like Rand Paul and I say, that's a cool hairstyle, I wish I could do that. But you're a horrible person and I don't want you to be making decisions in my name, so I'm going to try to figure out some way, it might not be voting, but it might be something else, some way to get involved and to get engaged. If they think that the crazy guy from Indiana saying this crazy thing about women's rights and rape and all this horrible stuff that he said is actually the policy that people are going to support, that's a little strange. I think he's saying it because when we talk about the Tea Party, we're not just talking about the wealthiest, most white, privileged people. We're talking about a broad swath of people who believe strange things, that have large gun collections and know how to make pipe bombs and live in the woods, and they're difficult to track because of freedom and liberty and all this stuff. And these are the people who are going to act if they feel the system is acting against them. These are the people that we don't want to feel like it. You can say, just suck it up to the Koch brothers. You can say that. Suck it up, your privilege is coming to an end. You're going to be wealthy, you're going to still have influence, it's fine. But you can't say that to the people in the Montana woods. You can't say that to these people because they're going to consider that an act of war, and they're going to turn Timothy McVeigh on you. They say compromise is good for democracy and good for getting what we want. I'd like to tell another story about another good American, Nick Clegg. Nick Clegg, a wonderful American who compromised in order to get his views in, and we see what has happened to this poor guy and all of his vision of the liberal Democrats and stuff like that by selling out to the conservatives. The Tea Party took the opposite strategy. They didn't want to work with the Republicans. They wanted to form their own thing, and we've seen reform in the Republican Party. It might not be the reform we want, but it's given some actual different alternatives to make people think and to make people re-articulate their political position in ways that, oh, I'm not running a timer, I'm probably done, but re-articulate their position in ways that is actually healthy for democracy, because democracy is about engagement. Whether you like it or not, it's about engagement, and it's better to do it in the voting booth or in the public sphere than to do it by blowing up a federal building. Thank you.
Well, we'll now take feedback questions from the audience. It can be about the debate or about the tour or about international debating. More generally, we wanted to use this as an opportunity to address some of these specific themes or wider themes.
For the opposition, intriguing ideas, but how is the implicit threat of violence not kind of like hijacking a la Mussolini's black shirts or something like that of public discourse and public policy and social change and so forth? And if it is, then should we be preemptively striking them as terrorists?
Well, Waco worked out well. No, I don't think we should be preemptively striking them.
If you get the gist of what I'm saying.
No, I understand. I don't think...
Why is that a good thing for democracy if it's kind of, much of what you said is that there's this threat of physical violence?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that these people are making threats. I think that they have these beliefs. I mean, I don't think that they're like the most democratic people in the world. I think they have beliefs of the truth that come to them through divination. And I think when they see the government not doing it, they feel like they have the right to attack the government. I don't think they're going to be making threats like, you pass House Bill 2281 or we're going to attack. They're not doing that. They're not like formal, but they would commit more violence. But when they see somebody like Rand Paul saying this crazy stuff, then they're like, oh, this guy's like my liberator. I mean, that's what I would say. I don't think they're making those kind. I would say that people who make threats against the government to get what they want are probably bad. But I don't know. I mean, government shutdown, I don't know if that's a threat. I mean, I know I was very sad about the demise of American democracy when I couldn't get a guided tour of the Statue of Liberty. I mean, I don't think the government shutdown really does much. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I wept. I was like, democracy's dead. No national parks to tour. But I don't know.
I just think violence is much more likely if you exist in a discourse that legitimates your views. So people who become terrorists don't do it apropos of nothing. They do it because they exist in a discourse that legitimates their views. So if you exist in the Tea Party, which is legitimating your horrible views, that surely makes you more likely to commit violence if the Tea Party hadn't happened.
Well, should I respond to that? Do you want to say something?
have like evidence to answer that question, but well, like people's belief can drive someone to have like mass shooting. Like I'm thinking about a mass shooting to Sikh temple happened last year in Milwaukee. So that can happen. I don't know like if Tea Party gonna promote it or not. I don't have evidence now, but that can happen.
It might be less likely to happen if the Tea Party didn't get their way on gun rights.
I mean, one of the things about the debate, I guess, is maybe just looking at it in my head. I mean, as a debater, it's hard to look at it fairly, but maybe more of a distinction between the Tea Party and the Republican Party would have helped both sides, and like more analysis there on the gun rights questions, stuff like that. But as far as like the Tea Party leaders and what they're telling people to do, they're not telling people to like violently attack. They're telling people to like, you know, hold your hand over the heart and pledge allegiance to the Constitution and all this kind of stuff. Like, let's go back to the strict Constitution, which I don't think is an appeal to violence. I think it's more of an appeal to some kind of weird divination. Like, that's what it feels like to me when they interpret the Constitution. But I think it's still superior to people who are like, God is telling me that the government should have these laws and da-da-da. And the Tea Party gives these people a steam, it's like a steam valve sort of thing. So I don't know if like supporting or being involved in the Tea Party means you're going to go out and be violent. Like I said, I think that you might go around doing open carry nonsense. But I don't think you're going to attack a government, a federal official. That's, I guess, my point in the debate.
So I actually have a legitimate question about like differing views of whom the Tea Party is comprised and how that's being presented in Great Britain. Because, you know, we sort of get a characterization of the Tea Party as being like rich white males. And I think that in fact what the Tea Party is the class of people that Joe Paget talks about in Deer Hunting with Jesus, which is the permanent underclass of Celtic heritage, Irish and Ulster Scots that moved here in the diasporas. And they legitimately, they don't live the way that most maybe Anglo-Saxon white people versus Celtic white people in America live, because of historical inequities that have created a permanent white underclass that in no way has the same sort of disadvantages as non-white underclasses. But I don't think the Koch brothers are Tea Party. I don't think they're a characterization of what the Tea Party is.
Okay, so literally all statistical evidence demonstrates that the Tea Party members have above average income on average. Or like read Theda Skocpol, read any of the proper statistical analysis that's done on the Tea Party. They are richer than your average American. They are whiter than your average. It's like 90% white. Basically 90% are over average income. So there's difference in terms of like gender. Some actually say there's slightly more women or slightly more men, but around about 45-55 bracket. Yeah. But they're definitely wealthier than your average American.
Is that now or is that when it started? Because to me it started when...
The stuff that I'm quoting is particularly Theda Skocpol 2013, and that was done as a statistics over time.
Yeah, I mean, I think even if they are being supported by the people that you're talking about, the representatives and the ones who are making decisions in government and talking on national news and representing the Tea Party, which is presumably how we have to take it as a kind of force, and because the others are only voting
So
for
is
them.
that the distinction? Is that you're talking about the representatives versus...
No, so like people who explicitly say that they are members of the Tea Party. So like self-identifying members, which is really like the only reasonable way that you can measure. Sorry?
I said, are they issuing cards now?
Well,
membership cards?
Yeah.
I mean, like if people say I'm a member of a local Tea Party and then they go to that Tea Party, that's about as much as you can have in terms of like self-definition, and that's the only way of measuring that. There's no other way that we can do it. I could be like, well, Alice, I don't like you. You're a Tea Party member. But
I do love a good Tea Party.
I think the definition is more amorphous. The reality is more amorphous. I think even after the Tea Party arose, whenever that was, it has shifted around. And so I'm nervous about, you know, demographically saying it's this, when I think demographically it depends when you've looked at it and what you're looking at. Your granny statistics in particular, you know, puzzle me because, as you know, on my particular campus, we had a Tea Party candidate for Congress, and he's a good bit younger than I am.
So
But like you can't. It's not like you're like, oh, there might be a poor black guy. Like when you think of a Tea Party, you're like, of course it's going to be a rich white guy. Like of course he's going to be old. Like you're right. Like the statistics might not. I mean, maybe there's other numbers or whatever. But like my first presumption isn't like it might look like a Black Panther or it might look like a Koch brother.
Jamie, that's because the only presumption in the room is the media characterization of these people. There's no reality of these people.
Right.
These really are what's the matter with Kansas people, and they have an argument. And your argument is an access argument to having a debate. Your argument is they're so damn dumb they ought to be banned. And it seems kind of...
They're dumb, just that they're nasty.
Terrible.
And also that they shouldn't be banned, but that I regret them.
You're saying that we have this presumption that something is so wrong here and we're so damn right that we ought to ban other voices, which to me sounds like what you're accusing them of in a performative contradiction.
Okay, but literally the motion wasn't this house would ban
No,
the Tea
you were
Party.
fine in the motion.
It's like
You're fine. If it's the basis of performative contradiction, be like, yeah, we're totally okay with that too. Like, I'll take that burden on.
Walt Whitman took that burden on.
Yeah.
Do I contradict myself? Very well, I contradict myself. So I am writ large, I contain multitudes.
That's fair.
But in terms of argument strategy, just to follow up on what Al was saying, you all made a very strange choice, which was to basically say, yes, these people are wrong, but they should get to talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it seems like, you know, it plays up in terms of, well, the humor, but it doesn't seem to take the Tea Party very seriously. And I would imagine that, you know, one of the rejoinders might be, hey, we might be right.
Yeah.
Or part of the process of debate, we might turn out that some of these views, maybe not all of them, you know, we make punching bags out of some of them, but some of them might be correct.
No, I mean, that's actually a pretty good criticism, but, you know, as somebody who's bought the domain Sophist NYC, I look at my audience and I think, am I really going to make, at NCA, the argument that the Tea Party could possibly be right and get any kind of play? At NCA? Really? Yeah. So it's a strategic back and forth. But I do think that there's something to be said about the argument of entertaining the fact that we're all kind of dumb. Like democracy is kind of like we're all kind of dumb. So maybe we should listen to everything, even if we do think it's dumb. I mean, you know, in 500 years they'll be laughing at our ideas anyway. They're like, ha ha, DNA exoneration, how funny. You know, they're gonna have all these advances. They're gonna think it's dumb. They're gonna laugh at that like we laugh at leeches, you know, and in the humors and all that kind of stuff. Like they're gonna make amazing advances we can't even imagine. So everything we're saying is dumb from one perspective. Right? So that might be a strategy you could say, well, look, we're not going to presume that anybody's right here. We're just going to, you know.
This is the quintessential international debate community argument that we have at DP tournaments all the time regarding equity, right? There is Americans have a reputation of being hostile to equity in a lot of situations, and I think that it has to do with our cultural presumptions of the First Amendment. Freedom of speech, like you should be allowed to be a jackass in public, we sort of think, regardless of whether or not that's a good idea.
That was my Diogenes.
And it seems like this argument in itself is the underlying question of how do we create an environment in which all people can participate, yet all people can voice the fact that they might be stupid in some ways, and if in fact they are. Should that be allowed? And that seems like a very American versus the rest of the democratic world kind of argument.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, environment, but also I think this argument they made about the restricting and the gerrymandering and the voting law stuff is pretty good. That's why I ignored it. Let's get on to bigger issues, Mr. Speaker. There's all this technical stuff. Yeah. But it's a pretty good argument, and that might be the argument that you could blow up and say, it's like a smoke and mirrors thing about, like, if we do let everybody talk, it's not democracy, it's anarchy. And that doesn't work for rights preservation, right?
Also, I'm just not sure it's about allowing people to talk, because, I mean, you know, I'd love it if Michelle Bachmann wasn't speaking publicly anymore.
Here.
That would be great. But I don't think that, we're not proposing, like, a world in which the Tea Party is banned or restricted in any way. We're just saying, maybe the world would have been better if they weren't so nasty.
No, I mean, that's the way I read it too. I was just saying, here's what that alternate world would look like. You know? So
but they would have been
here's
nastier.
the vision of what, like, if we didn't have it, we wouldn't have this release valve, this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of what they're saying, people have said before, less extreme. You have, like, Jerry Falwell and the moral majority. You've had people saying, you know, immigration is too much. You have people saying, oh, you know, we should make government smaller. It's just they took all of those ideas and I went, whoa! And it's before people were willing to at least discuss them in some ways. Whereas
And Alan
this
will
movement-
do now a visual representation of Tea Party ideals.
I'm
You should have
so
worn that
happy
when you
with this
spoke.
hat. I'm going to wear it when I get off the plane and my parents are going to be horrified. But yeah,
The boom of Tea Party.
but yeah, so I think it's interesting what they've done, because a lot of these discussions were happening before, it's just they were discussions, whereas at least my perspective on it is now it's not really a discussion.
And I also think the judgment is on us, like citizens. So like, well, Tea Party people are saying what they believe, and yeah, like let them talk, but we gotta decide if the arguments are fair or not. So I would just, well, let them talk. And I gotta talk back, maybe, sometimes.
Thank you all for the discussion. One of the things that I hear going back and forth is that we're treating a lot of the groups in this discussion as monolithic, right? The left that can be energized, right? The Democrats that would oppose the Tea Party is one group. And y'all both talked about the importance of discussion in democracy, right? Is this discussion being shut down by those that are participating? This type of polarizing is good. So kind of more of the overall question that I have is that for both sides, really, if it's a lightning rod for the left, why was voter turnout on the left so low in the midterm elections, even in places like California where there's not gerrymandering? Conversely, if people like Murdoch saying things that pregnancy from rape is a gift from God, which is the statement that he makes in the Indiana Senate race, all 11 of those candidates that made those arguments lost. Right? So is it really bad for democracy if they lose? Is it good for democracy if nobody shows up?
Do you want to answer first?
I don't. It doesn't matter to me.
So the problem is that even if they lose, the fact that those ideas are then greater currency within American dialogue and within American politics legitimizes them and makes them more likely to be spoken of. Because, I mean, people aren't just racist inherently or sexist inherently. It's about creating discourses and about creating dialogue that other people then feed off. So that in itself is problematic.
I have a specific question about that. I'm wondering if you've seen in the British Isles the same sort of phenomenon happening with the Sinn Féin being more and more accepted as a political voice.
Or like Nigel Farage. Do people really listen to him?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's very different.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
I mean, I think Farage is probably easier.
Yeah, Farage is
talk
more the
about.
like, yeah, but so in the UK we've just talked ourselves into this belief that we have this enormous immigration problem, and most people you speak to will think that like we have millions of people washing up on our shores every year, and it bears literally no resemblance to the actual immigration statistics. But because everyone is on TV talking about immigration is a problem, people are like, oh well, there's no black people in my area, but they say it's a problem, so it must be a problem.
Yeah, and all our politicians have been like, oh yeah, it is a problem. And so the discussion now is, well, what limits do we have on immigration, and how do we have stricter immigration? Not maybe, oh, it's really benefited us a lot and it's fine. And there's just no one saying that, because people have to engage with the like terrible views at least a bit. But the problem is the engagement that you get, because people don't want to lose voters, is, oh yeah, that's an interesting point, and well, we should not. You're wrong, and it's a problem if politicians aren't saying that's wrong.
There's such cognitive dissonance with it as well. So my grandmother is of like the Daily Mail reading generation, and is like convinced that immigration is a problem. But when the chef from her favourite Indian restaurant is deported, she's then really angry about it because the Indian food in her area is now terrible. And she's like, we now have to employ English chefs in Indian restaurants. It's terrible. I'm like, that's just what you voted for. So yeah, it's very strange. Sorry, there was a.
I just wanted to say something about this lightning rod comment. I mean, maybe I used the wrong metaphor, because like hearing them re-articulate the argument again, maybe I should have said it's like lancing the boil. So I agree with them that that there's uptake in the conversation, but these conversations are happening in these very closed communities. And when somebody comes and says, "Come out, vote for me, let's have a demonstration," then we get to really see how infected the boil is, and these people come out, and it's like pretty nasty business, but it's part of a healing process. So maybe lightning rod isn't the right. Maybe I should have flipped it the other way. Now it's because, I mean, the voter turnout's low, but I wonder if you could make an argument that it's better or that's shifted in some way. Because like in the voter turnout, 2004 voter turnout was like high youth voter turnout, pretty extreme youth voter turnout, but then they all voted for Bush, which horrified the left wing, right? Like the majority voted for Bush, so everyone was horrified, and they were like, we thought youth voter turnout would solve it. It's like lazy adherence again, right? Well, young people are just going to be liberal. Well, no, they're going to think and decide what resonates with them. So I just wanted to say that maybe I should have done it the opposite way and talked about less is for the left, but maybe a lance for the right. Might have had more play. I don't know. Sorry, I just wanted to.
Is there even a way it might force the left to actually defend something?
You're right. That's very important. Yeah.
No, I was just curious because you were talking about how, sort of the whole way that the media in Britain portrays, immigration is a problem. How has that worked in terms of, like, political parties, like, again, American outsider looking in, like British National Party and a lot of those other, like, extremist groups that are about, British identity, foreigners, Muslims, we don't want them here in our country, that type of thing. How has that, like, played out? Because just from what I kind of tell, like, the BNP isn't as big as it was. Is it just that somebody else is doing it better now, or just, okay?
We have two phenomena at the moment. The first is UKIP, and they won the European elections, and they're racist and lunatics. And they're the ones who are like, we need to leave Europe and be on our own, because our economy would be totally fine. No problems. And that we should basically cut off immigration. But they have this facade of being like, I'm not racist, but, which most people have sort of bought into. We'll have to see how it plays out in the next elections as to whether they actually can gain seats in Parliament. But hopefully, because they now have one seat in Parliament as a result of a by-election, but like whether they can actually do well as well in the elections, in which case I'm moving. And we also have the English Defence League, who are like the BNP, but nastier and more anti-Muslim and more violent.
Yeah, and people sort of distinguish between those things. So it's like, I wouldn't vote for the BNP and the EDL are obviously bad, but UKIP are making some good points.
Oh, okay.
And it's really interesting. So the televised public debates that we had for the first time before the last general election with the three main parties, so Conservative, Labour, Lib Dems. But now they've said, we should open up the debate to UKIP. And there was massive outrage because the Green Party already had a seat in Parliament, but the Green Party were never included. And so obviously it's about trying to pander to this kind of mainstream agenda that's being pushed through. Even if, in terms of representation, they don't have more of a right than one party that was already being ignored. So it's very interesting how that's all sort of playing out.
Anti-democratically, I'm all in favour of shutting down those voices. I wouldn't drive my grandmother to the polls because we thought she was going to vote UKIP. No vote for you.
I have a question. It's actually not about this specific debate, but we gave hosts a very long list of potential motions to choose from, and some of them weren't taken up, and many of them were. So I was wondering if, in reflecting on this process, if you could say a little bit about, did you find anything interesting in terms of the trends of what people had you debating? I heard you answer a question at my institution on Monday about how certain topics that are very hot here would never be taken up in the UK, and so maybe a little bit about the way that you've approached that on the tour.
So we gave a list of 10 topics, which some of you have received, and the ones that were most popular were the Tea Party, whether or not to imprison individuals who pose a direct and continuing threat to society,
and legalising all drugs, or recreational drugs.
Well, the other ones and there was one about sort of religious organisations funding, being part of the electoral process, that lots of places took up but moulded a bit often to different things. We gave 2 feminist motions as a suggestion that maybe feminist motions were particular. No institution picked any of the feminist motions. And we gave 1 IR motion, and that wasn't picked either. Any other ones that weren't picked?
I can't remember. The list.
Yeah, so it tended to gravitate around those kind of like more policy-oriented issues. So I think a lot of American institutions were less willing to discuss, have more of a philosophical debate.
Yeah, and I think we were very happy to debate things that institutions gave us as well, because it made for a change, especially because we were debating the same topics quite frequently, and that was interesting to see how different teams would approach the debates. But yeah, there were some things that we thought would be really popular, and because they're really popular. And obviously it's difficult because you never know as a public debate what schools are going to want, because some schools, like the legalising drugs motion, I think that was mainly students led. You know, whatever extracurricular reasons that might be. But then I think the debate about the Tea Party is perhaps more broadly interesting and a little bit more respectable for universities. But I think we had ones that similarly fit similar categories. So we had one about like pop music and sort of female sexuality, which I think is similarly like culturally interesting as the drugs one for sort of young people. But that wasn't picked, and it's difficult because you never know what the institutions want from their debates. But so in terms of the range that were picked, I think it's interesting. But I understand why they were picked, because the Tea Party is topical, the prison system is terrible, and drugs are fun but also dreadful.
And also I think it's probably because they're more policy oriented, like those of this house would, rather than this house believes that, which I think makes it more accessible. But we also had some excellent suggestions from some of the places we went to further for different motions. Like I remember at Texas State we did one about
segregation.
Yeah, that was good. That was fun. And it was actually quite nice to have institutions like pick different motions, because by the time we'd debated legalising drugs for like the 8th time, Alice and I were like, so crime deal, straight to that. Forget marijuana, it's legal, it's fine, don't worry about it. It actually became quite, though I think the more you debate something, actually like it gets a bit stale.
What were the feminist motions that weren't chosen?
So this house as a feminist would not join the army. And then I always say the next one, so I get confused.
This house applauds the rise of female pop artists who glorify assertive female sexuality. We think these are great debates.
Yeah. That second one is like a super popular motion at US BP tournaments right now. We've debated that 3 or 4 times this year at BP tournaments.
Yeah, we
super
did it
popular in different forms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the other ones that we had, but I can't remember.
St. Carthus.
No one liked that either.
And we had one on. We had one that was a little bit more Eurocentric. So the right to be forgotten. And one institution picked that. It was quite a confusing conversation, because I think your privacy laws are quite different to our privacy laws. Which makes that whole discussion very difficult. And I understand why people didn't select that one.
I think in hindsight, actually, we should have probably put more effort into figuring out the precise differences in American and like European law, because we're used to debating in worlds and euros, where people debate sort of more abstractly, whereas here teams were really keen to tie us down to the American situation. They were like, no, this is the situation in America, that's the only situation we're debating. And often the motion doesn't apply in the same way. So like we had a motion like this has to amend the US Constitution to prohibit the involvement of religious organisations from electoral politics, and then only figured out later your tax system already does that. But then that's really complicated. That's a mess.
And that's only really technical.
Yeah.
So technically doesn't allow that.
Yeah, so precisely that ends up like a really messy debate as to what you were changing.
Right.
And
who gets to say what in which sort of pulpit.
Yeah, and we had one actually in terms of funding for political parties, where we had making donations anonymous, and one university took that but changed it slightly to ban private political donations. But again, that was kind of difficult because of the way the like state and federal system works, and how you sort of divvy up the money if it was just the state giving everyone the same chunk, and whether like the federal government could say that. So that was, again, we tried to just avoid that discussion because it was confusing to us, and it would have been confusing to an audience too.
Well, and I regrettably, since we're talking about that issue, did not publicly thank Sarah Green, who has been the tour coordinator and has done all sorts of behind-the-scenes work to make this tour run smoothly. Unfortunately, she's not here, but we should definitely acknowledge her. Kate and Alice will be around. It's so great to see so many people show up and support them in this final event on the tour, and I want to thank all of the debaters for participating today.